I thought the worst thing my doctor could tell me was that something was wrong with my health, but instead he asked one quiet question that made me realize my entire family might not be mine. I'm 46 years old. My name is Liam Mercer, and until a few months ago, I would have described my life as steady in the least interesting way possible. Not exciting, not impressive, just reliable. I've been married to my wife, Hazel, for 22 years. We met in our early 20s in Madison, Wisconsin, back when our biggest problems were rent and figuring out what we wanted to do with our lives. I was finishing school and working part-time. Hazel was juggling 2 jobs and talking about the future like it was something flexible, something we could figure out later. We grew up together. That's the phrase I always used. We learned adulthood side by side, how to argue without crossing lines, how to stretch a grocery budget, how to fix things ourselves because calling someone cost money we didn't have. We got married young, but not impulsively. Confidently. People warned us, of course. They always do. But we felt solid in a way that didn't need chaos to feel real. We bought a modest house in a quiet suburb just outside the city. A narrow driveway. A backyard just big enough for a grill and a worn-down swing set. The kind of place no one ever posts online because nothing remarkable ever happens there. And for a long time, nothing did. We had 2 kids. Caleb, our oldest, is 19 now. In college. Home just enough to remind us he's still ours, but distant enough to feel like he's already halfway gone. Mason, our youngest, is 16. Loud. Restless. Still slamming doors like they owe him money. Hazel and I weren't perfect. We argued about money. About work stress, about whether we were being too strict or not strict enough as parents. But none of it ever felt dangerous. Felt like maintenance, like proof we were still invested. I never suspected cheating, not once. So when my life started to unravel, it didn't begin with secret messages or late nights or unexplained absences. It started with exhaustion, not the normal kind, something heavier. Like my body was constantly dragging itself through the day. I'd wake up already tired, push through work, crash on the couch early, then lie awake at night staring at the ceiling like my brain didn't understand that we were done for the day. Hazel kept telling me to see a doctor. I kept brushing it off. Eventually, I went. Routine visit. Routine blood work. The kind of appointment you forget about as soon as you pull out of the parking lot. 2 weeks later, I got a call asking me to come back in. They said some of my results were inconsistent. Nothing urgent, just worth checking. That word, inconsistent, didn't mean anything to me yet. More blood work, a couple follow-ups, long waits in sterile rooms with outdated magazines. It was boring, clinical. I didn't think about my family once. Then, during one appointment, the doctor asked if I was sure about my family medical history. I told him what I knew. Heart issues on my dad's side. Diabetes on my mom's. Nothing unusual. He nodded, scrolled through my chart, then stopped. He said some of my genetic markers weren't lining up the way he'd expect. I laughed, half joke, half nerves. I said, "What, am I adopted or something?" He didn't laugh back. That's when he explained, carefully, professionally, that sometimes genetic inconsistencies can point to non-paternity. Not as an accusation, not as a conclusion, just as a medical variable. He suggested a paternity test. The room felt smaller, like the air got heavier all at once. I told him it wasn't necessary. He said it wasn't mandatory, just helpful for ruling things out. I agreed, mostly because I wanted the appointment to end. I didn't tell Hazel. Not because I was hiding anything. I just didn't see the point. In my head, this was paperwork confirming what I already knew. Life continued. Dinner, homework, work deadlines, the usual. When the results came back, I was at my desk at work. I opened the email expecting medical jargon I wouldn't fully understand. Instead, it was painfully clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim. I moved the mouse to wake it up, like maybe the numbers would change. They didn't. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was denial, but the practical kind. Labs make mistakes. Samples get mixed. Data gets entered wrong. Systems fail all the time. I checked the name. My name. The date. the lab number. Everything was correct. I finished my workday on autopilot, drove home, parked in the driveway and sat there longer than I needed to, staring at the garage door like it might explain something. That night, after dinner, I brought it up to Hazel. I tried to keep my tone light, casual, like it was a weird anecdote. I said something like, "Hey, something strange came up in my medical tests today." Probably nothing. She looked at me and didn't say anything. I explained the doctor's comment, the test, the results. I even laughed a little and said, "It's probably a mistake." She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't look confused or defensive. She looked tired. She asked me to sit down. And that's when I knew this wasn't a lab error. Hazel told me she already knew. She told me that early in our relationship, before we were officially married but already committed, she had a brief affair. A few months. She said it ended before she found out she was pregnant. She said she didn't know who the father was at first. She said she genuinely believed it could be me. Then later, after Caleb was born, she started putting things together. Timing, details. Something the other man said years ago that stuck with her. She never tested it. She just knew. And she decided to never tell me. She said she was scared. She said she loved me. She said I was already acting like a father, already attached, already building a life with her. She said telling me would have destroyed everything. Then she said the sentence that still won't leave my head. I thought if I carried it long enough, it would stop mattering. I asked her if she ever planned to tell me. She said no. She said biology doesn't erase 19 years of being a dad. And the worst part is I don't fully disagree. Because I love Caleb. I don't look at him and see a stranger. I don't feel detached. But I do feel like something fundamental was taken from me. Not just honesty. Choice. She didn't just hide an affair. She decided what my life would be without my consent. And as she sat there explaining how everything she did was to protect our family, I couldn't stop wondering, who was protecting me? The days after Hazel told me the truth didn't explode the way I thought they would. There was no shouting. Everything just slowed down. We kept waking up in the same bed, still brushing our teeth side by side, still asking each other if we wanted coffee. On the outside, our life looked exactly the same. Inside, I felt like I was walking through rooms that had been rearranged overnight. I kept replaying moments from the past, searching for clues that weren't there before. Memories I used to trust suddenly felt unreliable, like photographs I'd edited without realizing it. Hazel gave me space but not distance. She hovered in this careful way, like someone trying not to spook a wounded animal. She spoke softly. She checked in without asking questions that required real answers. I think she was afraid that if she pushed, I'd finally snap. What she didn't understand was that I already had. Just quietly. I didn't go to work the day after she told me. I said I was sick. That part wasn't even a lie. My body felt heavy, like gravity had been turned up slightly. I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had left. Mason went to school. Hazel went to work. Caleb wasn't home. He was still at school hours away, living his life, unaware that his existence had just been reclassified in my head in a way I never asked for. I kept staring at the same spot on the wall, a scuff near the light switch. I remembered painting over it once, years ago, when Caleb was little and ran into it with a toy truck. That memory hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not because it wasn't real, but because it still was. That's what made everything so complicated. I didn't feel disconnected from Caleb. I didn't suddenly feel like he wasn't my son. If anything, I felt more protective, like the ground beneath him had become fragile without him knowing. What I felt disconnected from was Hazel. Every time I looked at her, I saw someone who had watched me fall in love with a child under false pretenses. Someone who had made a decision on my behalf and then lived comfortably inside the outcome. That realization didn't come all at once. Crept in slowly. At first, I tried to rationalize it. I told myself she was young, scared, that people make bad choices when they feel trapped. But then I thought about the years that followed. The nights we talked about having another child. The conversations about timing, money, readiness. The way she let me believe I was making informed decisions, when in reality, I was missing critical information about my own life. I asked her one night, quietly, if she ever felt guilty. She said yes. Immediately, like she'd been waiting for the question. She said it never fully went away, that it was always there, humming in the background. That sometimes she'd look at me playing with Caleb and feel sick to her stomach. I asked her why she never told me anyway. She said because every year that passed made it harder. Because the longer she waited, the more damage the truth would do. Because once our family was real, the lie felt justified. That word, justified, stuck with me. I asked her if she understood that every year she stayed silent, she was choosing herself over me. She cried then, hard. The kind of crying that sounds like your body is arguing with itself. She said she wasn't choosing herself. She was choosing us. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. But in my head, I kept thinking that us was something she controlled the definition of. A few nights later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the living room scrolling through my phone without really reading anything. Hazel came out and sat across from me. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said I didn't know what there was left to say. That's when I asked about Mason. I didn't plan it. The question just came out. Are you sure he's mine? The room went quiet in a different way than before. Sharper. Tighter. She said yes. Immediately. No hesitación. She said the timing wasn't even close. She said she'd never lie about that. I believed that she believed it. But that wasn't the same as trusting it. I realized in that moment that certainty meant nothing anymore. That reassurance had lost its value. Once trust breaks at that level, everything becomes hypothetical. Every memory feels adjustable. Every fact feels conditional. I started noticing things I'd never noticed before. Not red flags, just absences. How Hazel never talked about the affair partner beyond vague references. How she framed everything as something that happened to her, rather than something she chose. I didn't push for details. I didn't ask for a name. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure what I'd do with the information once I had it. Some nights I slept fine. Other nights, I lay awake replaying arguments we'd had over the years, wondering if she'd ever felt like she didn't fully belong to me. I wondered how many times she'd looked at me and felt relief instead of love. And then I wondered if that distinction even mattered. We didn't tell the kids. Not because we agreed not to, but because neither of us knew how to open that door without knowing what would fall through it. Caleb called one night to talk about a class he was struggling with. I listened, gave advice, told him I was proud of him. After I hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation. He needed me. I was still his dad in every way that counted. But I was also holding a truth that could change how he saw himself forever. And I didn't know if I had the right to decide when, or if he ever got to know it. Hazel kept asking what I needed. I didn't have an answer. What I wanted was impossible. I wanted to rewind time to a version of myself who still believed his life was exactly what it appeared to be. Instead, I was stuck in a version where everything was technically the same, but emotionally unrecognizable. I wasn't angry all the time. I wasn't even sad all the time. Mostly I felt unmoored, like someone had quietly edited my past without telling me, and now expected me to keep living in the present like nothing fundamental had changed. And the worst part was realizing that staying didn't feel like forgiveness, and leaving didn't feel like justice. Both felt like losses. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not because I was protecting Hazel, and not because I was trying to protect myself. I just didn't trust other people with something this fragile yet. But silence has a way of collapsing inward. After a couple weeks of carrying it alone, I started to feel like I was losing my grip on what was reasonable. Every thought looped back on itself. Every decision felt provisional. So I told someone, not a family member, not anyone who knew Hazel well. I told Aaron, a coworker I've known for years. He's the kind of guy who doesn't dramatize things. Divorced, remarried, practical almost to a fault. We were sitting in his truck during lunch, eating bad sandwiches, talking about nothing important. At some point, I just said it. No build up. I found out my oldest isn't biologically mine. He didn't interrupt. just listened. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Man, that's brutal." Then he said something I didn't expect. "But he's still your kid." I nodded. I'd already made peace with that part. Aaron went on. He said parenting isn't blood. That Hazel probably did what she thought was best. That people make desperate decisions when they're young and scared. He asked me if I loved my son. I said yes without hesitation. He asked if my life had been good. I said yes again, even though the word felt heavier this time. Then he asked, "So what are you really angry about?" That question followed me home, because I didn't have a clean answer. I wasn't angry at Caleb. That was clear. I wasn't even angry about the affair itself anymore. That happened decades ago, before our life solidified into what it became. What I was angry about was the absence of choice. Hazel didn't just lie once. She maintained that lie through thousands of moments where honesty was an option. Through conversations about our future. Through decisions that shaped our family. When I tried to explain that to Aaron later, he got quiet. He said he'd be furious if his ex had done that to him. He said, "I don't know if I could forgive the lie, even if I could forgive the situation." That felt closer to the truth. A few days later, I told my sister Claire. She didn't react the way Aaron did. She got angry, on my behalf. She said Hazel robbed me, that it didn't matter how long it had been. That deception on that scale didn't expire. She said I should demand answers. A name, a timeline, a test for Mason. She said I should leave even if I didn't plan to divorce right away. Listening to her felt validating in a dangerous way, like permission to feel something I'd been suppressing. But it also felt incomplete, because Claire didn't have to live with the consequences of any of that. She didn't have to sit at my dinner table. She didn't have to look at my kids. Everyone I talked to fell into one of two camps. Either Hazel was a villain who manipulated me into a life I didn't consent to, or she was a scared young woman who made a terrible choice and spent decades trying to protect the family that grew out of it. What no one could agree on was whether the outcome justified the method. At home, things stayed tense but functional. Hazel tried harder than ever. She cooked my favorite meals. She left notes. She apologized constantly, even when I wasn't upset in that moment. Sometimes that made it worse, because apologies are only helpful when they come with the possibility of repair. And I didn't know what repair looked like anymore. One night, weeks after the confession, we finally had the conversation we'd both been avoiding. We were in the kitchen late. Mason was at a friend's house. The house was quiet in that deep, nighttime way where everything feels amplified. Hazel asked me if I was thinking about leaving. I didn't answer right away. I told her I didn't know. She asked if I still loved her. That question felt unfair, but I understood why she asked it. I said yes, but I also said love didn't feel like enough right now. She asked me what I needed. I told her I needed to understand how she could look at me every day and decide I didn't deserve the truth. That's when she stopped crying and got very still. She said she didn't see it as deciding I didn't deserve the truth. She saw it as choosing a future. She said if she told me back then, she's almost certain I would have left. Not because I didn't love her, but because I would have felt trapped into raising a child that might not be mine. She said she couldn't risk that. I asked her if she thought I was that shallow. She said no. She said she thought I was human. That answer didn't comfort me, because what she was really saying was that she didn't trust me to make the right decision. She trusted herself more. I asked her if she understood that staying now felt different than staying then. She said she did. She said if I left now, it would destroy her, but she would accept it. I didn't know if that was honesty or resignation. The conversation didn't end with a decision. It ended with exhaustion. We went to bed without touching. The next morning, Caleb texted me asking if I could help him with something school-related. Something small. Something normal. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. I realized that no matter what I decided about my marriage, my role as a father wasn't negotiable. I wasn't going to disappear from his life. But I also realized that staying married to Hazel might mean accepting a version of love where my agency was optional. And I didn't know if I could live with that. Nothing officially ended after that conversation. Life just thinned out. Hazel and I continued living in the same house, but we stopped pretending it was the same life. We moved around each other carefully, like two people sharing space after a natural disaster, unsure which parts of the structure were still safe. Some nights we talked. Most nights we didn't. When we did, the conversations were small. Logistics, schedules, groceries, who was picking Mason up from practice. The kind of exchanges that don't require trust, just cooperation. I slept poorly. Not every night, but often enough that I started to dread going to bed. The quiet made it harder. During the day, I could distract myself with work. At night, there was nothing between me and my thoughts. I kept thinking about time. 22 years is a long time. Long enough to blur the line between what was chosen and what was simply lived. If Hazel had told me back then, my life might have gone in a completely different direction. Or it might have looked exactly the same. There was no way to know. But now, the weight of that unknown felt heavier than the truth itself. Caleb came home for a weekend visit about a month after everything came out. He walked through the door like nothing had changed, dropped his bag by the stairs, hugged Hazel, asked what we were doing for dinner. I watched him move through the house like he always had, comfortable, certain of his place in it. And for a moment I understood Hazel in a way I hadn't before. This was what she'd been protecting. We ate dinner together. We laughed. We argued lightly about politics. We did all the things families do when they don't know they're standing on a fault line. Afterward, Caleb sat next to me on the couch and asked about work, about how I was feeling. He said I seemed tired. I told him I was fine. It was the first lie I'd told him in a long time. That night, after everyone went to bed, Hazel and I sat at the kitchen table again. The same place where everything started. She asked if I thought about telling the kids. I said I thought about it constantly. I told her I didn't know if withholding the truth made me complicit in the same way she'd been, or if telling it would just pass the damage along. She said she'd support whatever I decided. I didn't believe her, not because she was lying now, but because there are some things you can't support once they exist. I asked her if she'd ever regret what she did. She said she already did, but she also said she'd do it again. That answer hurt more than I expected, because it meant the lie wasn't just a mistake, it was a strategy. And strategies don't age out. They just get justified by their outcomes. I started imagining two futures. In one, I stayed. We went to counseling. We rebuilt something quieter, more careful. I accepted that my life was the result of decisions I didn't get to make, and I focused on what still mattered. In the other, I left. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. I kept being a father. I redefined my life on my own terms, even if it meant starting over in ways that terrified me. Neither future felt like winning. Both felt like giving something up. Mason noticed the change before anyone else. He didn't know why, but he felt it. One night he asked me if Mom and I were okay. I told him we were just tired. He said, "You guys don't joke anymore." That landed harder than I expected. I realized then that staying in limbo wasn't neutral. It was shaping the emotional climate of the house in ways my kids could already sense. But so would leaving. Every option had a cost, and none of them felt fair. Hazel asked me one night if I could ever trust her again. I told her I didn't know. That was the most honest answer I had. Because trust isn't something you decide to have. It's something that either grows back or it doesn't. And I didn't know if mine ever would. So here I am, still married, still living in the same house, still showing up as a father every day, but unsure whether staying means accepting that my voice mattered less than preserving the outcome Hazel wanted, or whether leaving would mean tearing apart a family that, for all its flaws, is still very real. I haven't told my kids. I haven't made a decision. I haven't moved forward or backward. I'm just standing in the space between what I was given and what I was denied. And I keep asking myself the same question over and over. At what point does protecting a family turn into erasing someone's right to choose their own life?